All right. So tell us about May 1st, 1997. What happens this day?
So actually, prior, May 1st, I walked into the prison as a 22-year-old. I was found guilty for first-degree felony murder that had occurred in Tucson, Arizona. And, what it was, I had admitted to my involvement in a drug transaction. I was a middleman. And, I had been middleman in several deals years prior. However, this day the robber decided, I mean, excuse me, the buyer decided to rob the seller, and one of my associates was murdered in the process. Now, when this occurred, I wasn't there, didn't know it was going to happen, had no involvement in it, but because law enforcement wanted me to become an informant, and I refused, they pursued charges on me even after I turned over my weapon. Because they at first when they got in contact with me, they were saying, "Well, if you didn't do this, you need to prove yourself innocent." And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm a young kid. I mean, I'm 20. Well, when the crime occurred, I was 19, and I'm still young. And I say I was a kid because I had never dealt with law enforcement on this level. So I'm thinking like, okay, give them my gun, let them check ballistics. They took my fingerprints. They also hooked me up to a polygraph, and they figured, well, man, he's telling the truth. He didn't have anything to do with this. But
You
but
passed the polygraph. Wow. And they,
yeah,
they always act like those polygraphs mean something when they fail it. When they fail it. But when you pass it, they're like, oh well, never mind. Go ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
and this is where like, I mean, I didn't the advice of some of my elders, and this is why people don't talk to the police, because nothing you say is going to benefit you. And in this instance, they actually took everything that I was saying to prove my innocence and twisted it and turned it against me at trial to convict me. So, they wanted to use me for an informant because they figured, oh, he's part of a drug ring and we want to take down this drug ring. And I was like, no, I'm not going to become an informant. And at that point, I had stopped cooperating. So they ended up catching the alleged shooter. He goes to trial. He gets acquitted, and the prosecutor comes after me because my refusal to testify at his trial, and they charged me with first degree murder, even though I had just proved or gave them evidence that I had nothing to do with it. So, 1 day trial. They the actual trial started at 8, ended at 5. Uh, my dump truck attorney, and I'm going to say, my dump truck attorney was a court-appointed attorney, and he didn't even present a defense for me. So, here I am, 22, and get convicted of first degree murder and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Now, May 1st is when I actually walked through those
Walk
gates.
walk through the doors. Yeah.
And I don't care, I talk about this right now when I talk to youth, I mentor youth on the realities of these paths, because some people think it's a stripe. You got stripes, you went to prison. Um, but as at 22, no matter how well I took care of myself in the streets or was engaged in, I mean, going in those walls, 20-foot walls, where it's like, okay, these are the big boys. These are the worst of the worst, or excuse me, considered to be the worst of the worst. Um, in Arizona, and that was very intimidating. And then to have that L on your back, it's like, whoa, this is a game changing or life altering experience, and I was initially scared, and I'm not going to sit here and deny that, because I didn't know what was laying in front of me.
Hmm. So, with the actual incident, I want to make sure I have this right. That there was a drug deal, but it was a robbery gone wrong. you left before the actual murder happened, right? And
Correct.
didn't they put the victim, if I'm saying his name right, Francisco Soto, didn't they put his body in a trunk of a car?
Correct.
And at this point, you're already gone.
Yeah. So, and what it was where the transaction took place was one of the house or the apartments that, that I conducted several other transactions. And what I would do is just allow people to utilize it, and then I would just come back, clean up, make sure nothing, no scales or anything are out, clean up, and then lock the door and go on, and then somebody else hits me up and say, hey, we got this deal. Then, these were safe spaces, so we wouldn't have to make transactions out in the open, for large amounts of drugs and stuff. So, on my way back in, that's where, a gun was actually drawn on me, when I seen them carrying the cat out, and that was the threatening piece. So I think if I was there, I would have been a victim too, because their
Right.
intent was to rob. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So what's interesting is that the prosecutor basically blames you because the actual murderer, the alleged murderer, is acquitted versus blaming their own failures, versus blaming their own ways of not being able to try a case correctly. But I do want to ask you this because I've heard from so many people who say this. People who have cooperated, they still went to jail. People who didn't cooperate, that they still went to prison. In your case, do you think if you would have cooperated and did what they wanted, do you think that they still would have found a way to lock you up?
Well, and that was a thing because, I was willing to accept the time for what I did. Um, but at that point in time, it didn't seem like they were even interested in this murder that occurred. They wanted to get the whole enchilada. And that's where a lot of people don't understand. Like there was like 30, 40 people, um, associates who were part of this drug operation, or not this particular interaction. However, there was 30, 40 people on both sides of the border that was involved in this or I should say part of my association. And before the cops even caught up with me, they had information from a lot of these dudes in the community who were talking to them about, well, yeah, they were actually saying I did it, and then I was part of this bigger organization. So now their focus for these detectives shifted from just this single murder to where, hey, we might as well try to get everybody.
Well, I want to ask you this. I want to get to how you were released after 15 and a half years, but I do want to ask this first. How was
Mhm.
your family affected by you being behind bars for 15 and a half years?
Well, my family was hot at me because they was like, "You're stupid,"
Hmm.
like when I stopped, when I turned over everything and I seen that this was going in a different direction, and they wanted me to be an informant, I stopped cooperating. I'm like, nah, don't even. I'm gone. My family, I had a 6 year old at the time. Um, my family was pissed off at me because they was like, basically, you gonna lay down for something somebody else did. And when I went to trial, it really messed them up. And when they heard the life, and then I called them in to testify because my mom was also threatened. Somebody from the county attorney's office called my mom and told her, well, if he don't come and cooperate, we just gonna pin this on him. Like all of that is in the record. Um, but they threatened my mom and didn't allow her to come in and testify to the jury about that. Talking about they was going to charge her with perjury. So moving forward, it was a devastation, and I actually lost contact with a lot of family. They written me off because they said, okay, if you want to just go accept this life sentence, then we're going to move on with our life. And you know the saying, out of sight, out of mind. And I say this, Clay, because these are real. I don't care what range of You got some cats that play these hard games and this and that, and I'm so gangster. Ain't nobody wanting to be in prison for some shit that they didn't do. Excuse my friend. But it gets me upset because I was there, 2004. I get a letter. My mom diagnosed with cancer. My mom at that time was probably like in her mid 60s. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, if something happened to my mom, I'm not going to be able to see her. They're not going to fly me to a funeral. So that just weighed on me to the point where I started to just take a plea. Like when my case started looking good and it started getting momentum, I started to take a plea for something I didn't do. I'm like, look, just charge me with something, give me time served so I can get out and see my mom. Um, I had a lot of guilt. And my mom, because my mom raised me better than what I displayed. My mom didn't smoke, she didn't drink. She used to tell me that these cats you running around with, they not your homeboys. And I didn't want to listen. Yeah, they my partners. Ooh, no, and I see it, and I say this because when the case was finally overturned, I seen my mom 4 times before she passed away, and that's something I never lived down, even till today. Like, only thing I can do is honor her wishes to use my knowledge to make change. But I mean, the whole time I was down, I didn't see my daughter. I come out, she's 22. I'm actually a damn grandfather now. Um, I joke with her like, you need to slow your roll because ain't nobody gonna want no 38-year-old grandfather. My stock is going down. But no, um, it was a big strain on families because the system is just overwhelming. And these prosecutors, these police, and then going in front of an all-white jury, it really, like, I'm still going back analyzing things that happened to me at that time because it was like out of body experience. And then now there's a 15 and a half year gap that will never be filled.
Tell me how you were finally released in December of 2011.
So the sad thing about it is, my case, I go to an evidentiary hearing. um, Going back to that plea of me just taking a plea just to get out, um, because I wanted to see my mom, considering that she was getting, I didn't know how long she had. So I go back to court for evidence. I mean, I go back to court for resentence because the state had actually accepted that they would, okay, we'll plea out. Well, I go back to court, and this is where also it opened my eyes to the real system because the judge in the superior court now remember my case is in the federal. I had to appeal this all the way to the federal court, and they put my case on stay to bring me back down to superior court, who had jurisdiction to accept this new plea and resentence me. Well, the superior court, I mean, excuse me, the county attorney, the prosecutor at the county level refused to accept the plea because it was based on the premise of, or excuse me, the plea was initially based on ineffective assistance of counsel, which was the dump truck attorney. The judge refused to accept it because in the federal courts, the evidentiary hearing that they were giving me was based on prosecutorial misconduct and vindictiveness. So the judge was saying, hey, I will accept this plea based on the facts that the federal court had found, and not, there was no mention of ineffective assistance of counsel. So the prosecutor stands up, says, hey, Your Honor, can we go off the record? Go off the record. He says, you don't expect us to fall on our own sword, do you? And I'm looking at everybody like they just admitted to the misconduct. And they didn't want to accept the prosecutorial misconduct because now I think they're protecting themselves from a lawsuit. So all in a nutshell, My attorney, and I'm gonna say she badass Wonder Woman, looked like Wonder Woman too. She's like, you know what? We not even going. I say that's my little sister, my little big sister. She said we're not even gonna play games with them. You know, she lifted the stay in the federal court, and she was like, "Look, you're gonna be down here about 6 more months, but we're gonna go to this evidentiary hearing." You know, and we got him because there's a lot of evidence. To get your case overturned. So she said, just trust me. And I'm just thinking about my mom through the whole process. But I go to the evidentiary hearing um, in front of the federal magistrate. She looks at the case. Um, the prosecutor admitted like everything that he did. He's like, yeah, I did that. That was Peasley's mentality. He was cocky. He said, yeah, I did that. And if I had the opportunity to do it again, I wouldn't change a thing. So the magistrate judge didn't like that because it was serious evidence of not only vindictive prosecution but misconduct, meaning they had lied to the courts prior to, and she made the verbal recommendation, and this is something that you don't really see. Normally, a judge will go back, you will get a ruling 90 days or somewhere down the road, but this this was so much of a miscarriage of justice and so much misconduct involved in my case. The judge made a verbal ruling that she was recommending my case be overturned. So I go back to the yard. Now I have to wait for it to go up to a federal judge for him to sign from the magistrate. I go back to the yard. This judge gives them 180 days to retry me on prosecutorial misconduct and vindictiveness, which is a fundamental
Wow.
uh, error, and there is no second chance to that. But he gives them 180 days to retry me. So now I'm just sitting on the yard. The state know they don't have anything, so I'm just marinating. So 30 days. It's December 20th, and the officers come and they say, "Hey, you need to roll your stuff up." So I'm like, "Where am I going?" It's like, "Well, you're being released." I'm like, "Nah, get out of here, man. I ain't heard from my attorney." So I tell him, I say, "Look, I'm not moving. Let me call my attorney." Because in my mind, I'm thinking that they came up with some BS charges to send me back and don't want me released. They're sending me back to Superior Court. So I'm like, nah, I ain't going nowhere. So he's like, well, come down here. We need to take your fingerprints, your pictures. You are being released. So I'm going through the motions. I go and do it, come back to the yard. The deputy warden calls me in and she's like, I just want to let you know we got word from central office that you're going to be released, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, get out of here. I don't trust her. So she was like, no, I know. And this is an African American deputy warden, but I'm still like, hey, you the police. I don't believe you. So she was like, yeah, you're being released. You don't have to believe me, but go roll your stuff up. I'm happy for you. I understand your case better now. That's what she said. I go back to the building and the officer tried to escort me back down the run to roll my stuff up. But I go into the counselor. Your counselors let you make calls. I said, hey, I need to make a call to my attorney. And he was like, well, give me an hour. I said, look, man, they just told me I'm being released and I don't know what's going on. So he was like, oh, for real? So he was like, here. So he gives me the call. I call my attorney and she's like, oh, you're being released. Hold on a second. So I hear her typing, uh, keyboards typing. And she comes back and she says, oh my God, you are being released. Um, well, unknown to me, because she didn't want to get my hopes up high of being released, she had filed a motion to get me out for the holidays. Like my birthday is December 22nd. So I was released 2 days before my birthday. So she had filed a motion to the judge saying, hey, the state is not going to bring charges. He's just marinating. Can we get him out for the holidays, his birthday? His mom is sick. And the judge agreed. And so now I basically go on a home arrest type thing without a monitor. to where I'm supposed to stay in my sister's custody until things are finalized. And I just remember going back down the run, jumping in the shower, like everybody was on the run, like, what's up? Hey, let me. I diverted them, go into the shower, close the curtain, and cry for about 3 minutes
Hmm.
because it was true. Um, and then I remember just grabbing my stuff, like, man, let me get the hell up out of here and do it moving. But getting out, my anxiety was so high because it was a new world. And I tell people it's like getting in a time machine, traveling 15 and a half years into the future. And the cat says, hey, get out. Here's everything you had on your books. Get out. No training, no nothing. And then I get out and I see, the first thing you're observing people, but everybody is looking down at their hands. I'm like, what is everybody doing? Like, is this a zombie apocalypse or whatever? But I didn't realize like people were looking at their phones, their smartphones, um, using a debit card, things like that. So that's kind of like the release side of things. Um, just overwhelmed with anxiety, and then released into this new world.
We have to head out soon, but I do want to know the work that you're doing now, being a part of the Arizona Justice Project and working with the ACLU. So tell us the kind of work you're doing now before we go.
Okay, so real quick with the Arizona Justice Project, they represented me for 10 years, and the late great, and I'm going to say this late great. I encourage your listeners to look up Larry Hammond. Larry Hammer was a founder of the Justice Project. He just passed away last year, and a remarkable man. I called him Pops. That was my Philip Drummond, um, because they represented me 10 years and believed in me when nobody else did. And even till today, the project, these attorneys who represented me have also been supportive of the work that I'm doing in the community to bring change here in Arizona. So I represent them now. I'm bringing more awareness around wrongful convictions for the Innocence Network here. Arizona has no compensation, so we filed a lawsuit when I got out, but the state dismissed it. So it was like, hey, we messed up, but
I
thank
can't
you very
believe they
much.
do that. I
Yeah,
can't believe that these states no compensation
right,
when you've been exonerated.
right.
It's just disgusting. Go
and
ahead.
then and then prosecutorial accountability, like there's no, this prosecutor actually got a slap on the wrist. He was disbarred only after they wanted to censor him, and he refused to accept it because in his mind he didn't do anything wrong. So then they later disbarred him. So some of the work that I'm doing with the ACLU is prosecutorial accountability. Prosecutors have the most power. We need to bring more awareness to the people who, and most of your county attorneys or DAs, they're voted in. So we need to educate voters as to these practices of them just seeking convictions and not representing the community in the interest of justice. And justice does not mean confinement or conviction.
Well, I want to encourage folks, like you said, you didn't get any compensation from Arizona, which is just bizarre to me. But if folks can donate to you if they're able to, your Cash App is KHA dollar sign KHALILRUSHDAN. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's your Cash App. That's your Venmo, Khalil Rashdan, KAHLILRUSHDAN. So we'll put that on the video as well, so folks can help if they can support, if they can show some love.